Welcome everyone to episode 52 of Kowalski Analysis. I'm your host, Rob Kowalski, and we have a really exciting episode in store for y'all tonight. Last week's episode was amazing. Kevin Sorbo, really enjoyed speaking with him. If you didn't get a chance to see it, go back and take a look at it. But let me tell you about tonight's guest before I bring her in. Her name is Jennifer Maggio, and she's an award-winning author and speaker with a riveting personal testimony through homelessness, abuse, and multiple teen pregnancies before surrendering her life to Jesus. At 19, Maggio was pregnant for the fourth time, living in government housing and on food stamps and welfare. She ultimately went on to become an 11-time Circle of Excellence winner in corporate America and is now a vocal advocate for abstinence. She left her corporate successes behind to launch a global initiative to see single moms living a life of total freedom from financial failures, parenting woes, and emotional issues. And she is now the founder of the Life of a Single Mom Ministries. It's a global nonprofit that has helped thousands of churches in 19 countries effectively minister to single moms in their community. Jennifer's the author of 4 books, including Overwhelmed, her autobiography, and The Church and the Single Mom. She has written for countless magazines and websites, and has been featured in hundreds of media venues in print, television, and radio with the New York Times, Focus on the Family, the 700 Club, Moody Radio, Family Life Radio, Power Women, and many others. And she is one of the world's leading voices on single parent issues. And tonight, she is my guest on Kowalski Analysis. Before I bring her in, really quickly, just want to mention my sponsor, Mr. Micah Hughes. And I just want to share my screen with y'all so you can see logo. Micah does everything real estate. If you're looking to buy a home, sell a home, or just get into investing in real estate, give Micah a call, 443-532-8450. Let him know I sent you. His email will be in the show notes. And again, he will take good care of you. I promise. If you are looking to do anything in the world of real estate, please give him a call and mention my name. I would greatly appreciate it. All right, let's bring in our guest. Jennifer, thanks for joining me.
I'm glad to be here. Glad to just see where the conversation leads, and hopefully it'll encourage someone. And that's what we do it for, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Love it. Love it. I love your story. My mom was actually pregnant with me at 14.
Wow. I didn't realize that. That's unbelievable.
Yeah. And my dad, he was never in the same state growing up. So it was pretty much me and my mom my whole childhood. So I understand some of the struggle at least, but I'm definitely curious to dive in with you and just learn more about it. You were pregnant for the 4th time by the age of 19, right?
Yes.
When I read that, I was like, so tell me about your childhood. Were you raised in a Christian home or?
Boy, what a loaded question. And you didn't even realize it. If you asked my dad, he would say yes. He was a believer, very young, but the dynamic of our home certainly didn't reflect that. So for 20 years, my dad was a deacon at a local Baptist church with his first wife, very active. And then ultimately went through a divorce and became very alienated from the church and hurt. And we were taken to church. My twin sister and I were taken to church and dropped off. On Sunday mornings, my dad didn't attend with us, but he always made it a point to talk about how important it was. So my dad married 6 times. And
wow.
So there's all of this dysfunction. And so were you raised in a Christian home? I guess if that can even be a response.
Sure. No, if you asked my mom, was she a Christian? She would have said yes. There was lots of different things going on that we didn't go to church for sure. I would actually go to church sometimes by myself because there was a church in the neighborhood and there were some kids that I like to hang out with, but it was nothing. There wasn't a whole lot of fruit at home, no evidence of it. So it didn't stick with me. Even me, I ended up becoming a stripper when I was 19. I was like the most sought after stripper in Baltimore for a while. And then I was running the nightlife. I was a pretty bad person looking back. I didn't realize at the time, of course.
Right.
But if you would have asked me if I was a Christian, I would have been like, yeah, because my grandmother was a Christian. So I guess, of course, I'm a Christian. That's would have been my thought process, would have been like, yeah, it's probably on my birth certificate. There certainly was no fruit up until 27. And it wasn't perfect after that even. But yeah, I get it. I totally get it. Okay. Your dad's married 6 times. You're seeing that pattern, obviously. And then was the father in the picture of any of these kids? Same guy?
He early on when the kids were really young, he was, and I guess there's just a lot of grace there because when, we're 19, we're 20, we're trying to figure life out. He was away at college and was a college athlete. And so that was his thing. So the day-to-day was definitely left up to me. He also fathered multiple other children during this time as well. So we don't have time today, Rob, to go into all of it.
He hadn't mastered the pull out. Obviously.
Right. So, it's kind of, it validated love. Like it validated this relationship as legit type of thing instead of like, this is a kid that I'm going to have for the next 20 years, that is going to have the residual impact of a dad not being around, is going to break him emotionally. And so was he around? Yes and no, not with consistency. And then later on, when I moved on from the relationship, he really used the kids as a pawn to get to me. And it was really devastating for the children, because they didn't know at the time what the deal was. So I had 2 miscarriages and I wound up having 2 children. So just to clarify, I had 2 kids that I was parenting alone, living in the projects on food stamps and welfare. I had just really every statistic that you probably have read about a single mom was probably part of my story. And then trying to figure out how to do it so that you don't break the kids. Because I always felt broken in my life. There was so much to my childhood that I realized I was duplicating in my own home with my kiddos. And it wasn't what I wanted, but yet it's where you are. I'm sure that, like, when your mom, like, she's 14, 15-year-old kid trying to raise a kid. It's very complicated.
Yeah. Wow. So I guess my question when I read that, because I don't know if you've ever heard that song. It says, "You are more than the sum of your past mistakes. You are more than the problems you create." I was listening to that the other night, actually. And it's so many people, their whole identity is with whatever they've done. I know that for me, I was like, when I became a Christian, I had this radical conversion experience, but I was like, I'm like the least religious person I know. Why would God want anything to do with me? So how did you get over that whole like identity issue? Because I think it's like a false identity trap that people fall into. If they make some mistakes, they automatically assume it's who they are, not just something that happened or something that they did. So I'm reading about your turnaround of being so successful in corporate America and then going on to start your nonprofit. Like, how did you get over that?
I would argue that all of the successes were a direct result of that. It's almost like perfectionism is a bondage too. So if I run really fast and I become really successful at everything that I put my hand to, then that must mean I have value. So of course I'm valedictorian. All of the abuse, all the brokenness, of course I'm going to be the top in the class. Of course I'm going to seek out validation in all these other places. And that's what happened even in corporate America, although I didn't realize that's what was happening. And there's nothing wrong with being successful in corporate America. And I think God gave me influence there, but it was so that someone could validate me. I was in a male dominated field as one of the only females in the room most of the time. So I needed to be, I'm trying to think of a great word. I needed to be tough. I needed to dominate the room. I needed men to know that I was smart, that I wasn't going to be ran over. That was a result of being abused repeatedly, but I didn't see that until now, more full circle. And I also didn't understand that to be successful didn't mean I had to bulldoze everybody along the way. And so all of that was worked out. And even now, God's used all of that for the organization that I run now. But I would argue that there are people right now that don't have as traumatic a story as I do, that are just as hell-bent on proving. They're proving their value. They're proving that God loves them, that they're worthy. They're checking the list. And a relationship with God is so much more intimate than that. And man, I had to spend so many years undoing the damage that the local church did to me. And I think that's where maybe like where you're talking about, hey, I would profess Christianity, but it was performance-based. Everything was performance-based. So if I do this, I'm bad and God doesn't love me. If I do this, I'm good. And that means that I'm worthy to be in church and in his kingdom.
What was the industry you were in?
I was in the financial industry. I did mortgages and personal loans and all that kind of thing.
Okay, cool. So what led you to starting the Life of a Single Mom Ministries?
I would have said I would have retired in corporate America. I was very happy there, made a lot of money there. But when I had my daughter, who's now 14, the experience was so different. I had a husband. I had somebody that went through the pregnancy with me, that went through, I went through labor and delivery completely alone with my first year. You sit for 20 hours in a hospital room by yourself. That's trauma. That is horrible. So my experience with the first 2 was everything was jaded. And then when I had my last child, it was everything God intended for it to be. It was like restoring everything that the locust ate. Literally, God given me everything that is supposed to be the experience. And it brought up all the emotion of what it's like for single moms to be alone, to do it alone. It reminded me of the bathroom floor experience, the suicidal moments, and that I had to do something to give back. So actually, I didn't think that I would start an organization. I just went to my local church and said, hey, I want to start a single mom's Bible study. Like, I just want to do something to give back. I didn't know enough scripture in my mind. I wasn't religious enough. I didn't clean up well enough, but I knew I was so burdened I couldn't function. Like, I've got to do this. And then just started with 3 women. It grew to 75 women in 6 months. And it was like the largest Bible study at the church. And then it just morphed from there. It's like, okay, we need to do this in other churches. And how do we do that? And so it really was over time of seeing this major need, and that I wasn't the only mom. And it wasn't just young teen moms. I think that was the other thing, is like, I thought, okay, it's just teen moms. They're the ones that are really struggling. But what I found out is it's like 45-year-old divorced women and 50-year-old widows and 30-year-old mom. It wasn't an age thing. It wasn't a socioeconomic thing. It wasn't a demographic thing. It's every single mom needs to have support.
Hey, Rob Kowalski here, and I just want to take a moment to encourage you to go over and join the City Fam Facebook community. It's a free Facebook group to join, and in it you'll meet purpose-driven people from all over the world that want to enjoy life to the fullest. So go there now, answer a couple questions, and we will give you instant access that same day. Find it on Facebook or simply go to www.friendswithbetterbenefits and it will take you right there. While I'm mentioning it, if you're single, searching for real love before sex as I like to say, join the Waiting Works community too. It's another free Facebook group I started designed to help people wait well, date well, and hit the mark in life and love. And you can find that group by typing in www.reallovewaits.com. I'll see you over there. Now back to our episode.
So talk about some of the challenges. What are some of the biggest challenges that single moms face?
It depends on who you ask. I would say that they would tell you that their biggest challenges are financial and parental. It's okay, I need to figure out how to pay all of my bills and not feel like I'm drowning every month. And then parentally, I need to make decisions so that my kid doesn't end up incarcerated or end up dropping out of high school, or all these statistics we see. I would argue that the emotional and spiritual component are the biggest struggles they have, but they're trying to fix the temporary. It's like, if I can fix getting the bills paid, that life will be easier.
Right.
And so we really spend a lot of time with the emotional and spiritual piece to fix what's broken, to introduce them to the one who can, to talk to them about the abuse and how it impacted them, or the trauma or the decision making. And then we'll talk about parenting and finances. So we think that's important, but calling around to all these nonprofits to get your light bill paid is not the most pressing need, even though I know in the moment you think it is. It's, let's teach you how to function so that you can actually parent. Let's deal with the depression so that you can get out of the bed and do some of these other things. And I think that's probably one of the things that a lot of nonprofits and churches even miss, which is, let's fix the problem. Let's fix this surface level problem.
Yeah.
And paying the light bill or giving out the bag of food, again, all worthy things, but it needs to be hand in hand with like long-term, let's help them fix their life.
Love it. Love it. It's like the urgent versus the important. So I actually just went to a church service a couple weekends ago, and I posted a piece of content. Where I was vlogging about this, and this guy ran this inner city ministry where he feeds people in the inner city that are like, they're drug addicts or prostitutes, and he does really great work. And I don't deny that there needs to be that safety net there, but at some point we have to go, why are they falling into the river? And that, for me, City Fam, we don't need to get into it because it's not my place to talk about the nonprofit, but we're trying to basically, a lot of times people do it because they're bored or they're lonely and they're looking for something to do. And if they don't have nothing to do, they'll go use, or they'll call that person that they know they shouldn't hang out with. So like the church, and I've said this a lot, is the church has done a great job of feeding people's physical hunger throughout the year, soup kitchens, food pantries, over mission trips or whatever, feed the kids. But there's a whole new hunger now for community that people have. And the church, like when I became a Christian, I went to church on Sundays and I heard a really inspirational message, but then 6.5 days a week, I was sitting around with my thumb up my butt and I didn't know what to do or who to do it with. I was like, they just tell you not to sin, and they're like, see you next Sunday. Good luck out there. I was like, so I totally get what you're saying, where it's, yeah, okay, giving them a bag of groceries is great, but we got a lot more problems to fix than that. So what are you doing at the church first off, I guess it sounds like there's some church hurt, because you said something about that. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So I think part of it, Satan does a great job of really convincing you don't fit in anywhere. You're pregnant 4 times outside of marriage. My kids are biracial, which I'm from the deep South, and my kids are older now. So I hadn't even seen a biracial kid when I had my first child. So there was complexity there. None of the churches were integrated where I'm from at that time in my life.
Wow.
So there's all of these elements of every possible barrier that's going to keep you out of the church. The church that I went back to had 50 members, and I really was the only single mom there. So everything else looked good from the outside and I was the outcast. And I felt that way. I don't think that the church treated me that way as much as I just felt that way.
Sure.
And I think that's an important part to note, because it's easy for people to say, the church is full of hypocrites, or they just judge you there, or whatever. And no, Satan convinces you that's true to keep you out, because he knows that the church can change the world. And I believe that with all my heart. But so that there was that. I share the story about when my first Mother's Day as a single mom, the pastor had everybody to stand on Mother's Day to recognize the moms, like every pastor does. So I'm like already ashamed. Like I already don't feel like that I should be celebrated as a mother. So I'm standing there, and then he asks all of us to go to the stage. So we walk to the stage. Then we're standing in front of the whole church. So it's not many of us, but it's okay. This is embarrassing. Then he says, hey, husbands, everybody come up, and you're going to get a corsage out of this bucket and pin it to your wife.
Oh God.
So I'm standing there and I'm like, okay, do I sit down? Do I go get my own corsage and pin it to myself? It is the most awkward moment.
Humiliating.
And the pastor's intention was honor. It wasn't humiliation or shame, but that's where I was in my journey. And he hadn't even considered that there would be other types of moms. So thankfully, this woman who was a widow, whose adult daughter had pinned her corsage, saw me, and she walked across the stage and pinned one on me. And it was everything for me. It was being seen. It was love. It was care. And that's the foundation of our ministry. It's being seen. It's showing women they're seen. And so it's like I say, church hurt. Were there weird things that happened in church? Yeah, we don't have time. Like I could go through all the things people said. There was a little old lady one time that said to me, I had these two kids sitting with me on the pew, and she goes, well, where's your husband? She was innocent. And I go, I don't have one. And she says, oh, I guess that's how they're doing it now. And literally turns her back in the pew to let me know the conversation was now over. So I'm sitting there the rest of the church service going, I clearly don't fit in here. And so there were things, I think, that happened through the years that planted the seed that I didn't belong, but I already felt that before I ever had kids, to be honest.
So talk about some of the programs that you offer single moms.
So the biggest one we do is we work with churches to start single moms ministries. That's the biggest thing. Churches have youth groups, they have women's ministries, they have divorce care classes, but there's no place for moms to plant. And nationally, about 70% of single moms don't go to church anywhere.
That's all that. Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. And they're raising all these babies. So they're not going to go to church either, because mom doesn't think she fits in. So that's the biggest thing, is working with all different size churches, type of churches. It doesn't matter to us. We want to help them get a ministry plan together. But then beyond that, we want to serve the single mom directly. So we do national conferences and boot camps and all these kind of rah-rah events to fire them up, to make them be compelled to go to a local church. And then we do an education component of like online classes and things to meet them where they are if they're not yet ready to go into a church.
How are you actually finding them outside the church? How are you meeting them where they're at?
Social media is the biggest way. I think we get a little over 1 million hits a year on our website. So I think the website, just talking their language. We talk like single moms. Most of us are current or former single moms. And so we know the language, and there's no subject that's off limits. So we're talking about everything, and it draws them in. And then they go, okay, I want something better for my life.
Love it. That's so good. I love that you're focused on the unchurched. That's really good. That's my heart too. I think
most churches, so a lot of churches, it's crazy to me. Pastors will say to me, we don't really need a single moms ministry because we don't have any single moms in our church. And I'm like,
right.
Problem number one, dude, like they're in your communities. So a lot of my job is education in a very tactful and loving and compassionate way of saying, hey, this is a huge problem. They're raising kids. They are basically the next generation.
Right.
And they're not in your church. So how do you get them there? So it's outreach. So the one-time events, the car preps, the Christmas parties, all these kind of one-time things, which a lot of churches do well. But then if you don't have the group, the discipleship piece, don't plant. So they'll come to your Christmas party, but they won't plant and stay there. And so it's about educating the pastors on what is needed. And then we usually work with lay people. So it's like the pastor says yes. And then we're going to work with Betty in her church. And she's a full-time single mom. And we're trying to teach her how to do a Bible study.
I like it. So you're a big abstinence advocate too now, right?
I am, absolutely. And listen, I've been there, done that, and I know what's on the other side of it. And I have no idea where you fall on the spectrum.
I actually wrote a book about it called Why Waiting Works.
the one that's right there behind you that I didn't look at. Well,
I'm a huge advocate for abstinence. I've been on both sides. I know I've been down all the way to the end of the other road. I know where it goes. It goes nowhere. And I've done it this way for a long time, and I've seen the fruit in my life, and there's no one can convince me differently.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know the pain that I experienced. And now I even look at my dad's married 6 times, had tons of girlfriends and mistresses. It was crazy, all the sexual sin that's like generations deep in my family. And I saw my son duplicate that for a season in his life. And just even now he talks a lot about it and what happened and how hurt and broken and how he's had to do hard work that he would have never had to do had he just stayed on God's path for his life. And that he's married now, the trauma he brought into his marriage and expecting his wife to fix it, the trauma I brought into my own marriage. It's so much better to do it God's way. And I think for me, like I convinced myself that because I had been sexually assaulted for 10 years, that's why I was seeking out this validation. And that's why I needed people to say, you're pretty. And I used sexual appeal as that makes me worth something. And as an ex-stripper, like who I'm preaching to the choir here, right? But it's I needed all of that. And then it just left me more empty and more broken and more, and it's like an addict, like you have to keep doing it to try to fill the void. And now as a mom of teenagers and young adult children, oh my God, I don't want that for their life. So I'm so vocal about it, but it's not because I want to slap you on the hand and say, hey, don't have fun. Don't do this. I'm just saying, wait till it's right so that God can honor it. So it can be the most fun so that you don't have sex and then feel guilty about it. Or that's what a lot of my life was, is spending my Sunday in church, asking for forgiveness for everything I'd done the other 6 days of the week.
That's my number one motivation for wanting to get married. I want to have guilt-free sex.
Yeah, exactly.
Follow closely by companionship, but
but hey, I have to say this. I was on this podcast the other day with this lady, and she was talking about how now as a married woman, and she was in Vegas and probably has a similar story to yours, but she said sex is 10% of the whole marriage experience.
Not even.
Yeah, and you think this is it, and what happens is people will move into a marriage that they have no business being in order to have guilt-free sex, and then the marriage falls apart because there are all these other things. So now as I look at my husband, we've been married now 18 years, and literally is my best friend, like literally is everything that I want. He compassionate and loving and fun and all these things. So you can have a great marriage, but I went in, that wasn't the motivation at the time. Thank God we didn't divorce, but it was hard. There were years it was really hard.
A couple of things. One, I want to send you a video called 10 Reasons Not to Have Sex Before Marriage.
Okay.
It was my video. I made it. It went viral on YouTube. It was like the #1 video in the world on the subject for a while. Show it to any kids that aren't married of yours. Okay. And then 2, I'm going to send you a copy of my book. So if you want to give it to them to convince them, because it's pretty practical. I didn't write it from religious standpoint. It's just practicality of this is why it works, this is why it doesn't, and that may convince them. But the other thing I was going to say is you talked about your husband being your best friend, and I feel like there's a lot of people in this country that have seen a generation of people do it wrong. They've seen people have sex first and drift into marriages with the wrong person because of the sex. They get a soul tie, and then they think that marriage is the problem. Now a lot of people cohabitating and are not getting married because they think, I don't want any part of what I saw my parents do. And I'm like, no, you saw people do it backward. If I said, forget about the word marriage, that's just semantics. If I said, how would you like to have your best friend that you're physically attracted to that can help you reach your purpose in life? Would you like that? And everybody's like, yeah. I'm like, well, don't have sex before marriage because it'll help you choose the right person. Because once you have sex, everything gets clouded. And now you got all the hormones and you got oxytocin flowing and then you feel like you're in love, but it's not real love. And so it becomes very difficult for people, but I want what you have. To be able to be married for 18 years and be my best friend.
Still happy. And still what's so hard for me is when I'm sitting with girlfriends and they're in miserable marriages, and it's just, you can truly have a happy marriage and have all the things. And I don't know. So I'm grateful, but at the same time, I will never forget what it was like to not be there and just be wandering and trying to figure it out. And so it's the fuel that truly gives me the passion to do this every day. I will never be less passionate about single moms than I am today. When you're single, like do you have kids or no?
No, I don't. Never been in love, never married.
Yeah.
But I want to be. So you keep your eye out there. If you see
Okay. I'll make note.
I know a lot of single women.
I do know a lot of single moms. But when you're single, it's one thing. It's one thing to want to be married and you have all these struggles. But then when you have kids too, it exacerbates the problem. Everything that's broken is much bigger because you're raising little people and they're honestly copying a lot of what they see. So I'm just so passionate about these women and just the value that God has on their life and how they feel unseen and the insecurities they have and how to work with them through that. We're a small piece of the puzzle, but I'm grateful for God using us.
Yeah, that's awesome. What are the biggest challenges that if somebody comes to you and they decide they want to work with you? What are some of the biggest challenges that they have to overcome to get to really turn it around?
I think so. Challenges for single moms or for people who want to help single moms?
I'm thinking about like I was thinking about my mom. I'm like, imagine if there was somebody like you around when I was a kid, what the difference that it might have made in her life. And I was just thinking about that before you jumped on. So someone like her comes to you and they start getting some help. What are the biggest challenges that they have to overcome to turn it around and have a success story like you've had, where you went from being in the projects on food stamps to you're the success that I would imagine people would love, to emulate. So what are the challenges that you see for people that come in? What are they having to face? Is it just the identity thing?
I think it's a few things. So I think first we always say relationship comes before ministry because people have to know you care about them, and we can't just start giving them this, here's your 12 steps on how to get fixed, because it doesn't work. I think early on in the ministry, I was like, okay, I've gone through this single mom thing. I've learned all these things. I'm successful. So I need to just give them these 12 steps. And then I spent most of my life PO'd that they weren't following the 12 steps. So I've already told you, stop doing that. I think part of it is just relationship. The credibility is having been there and done that. So I think the more we can mobilize other single moms to pass the baton to the women that are behind them, that's where I've seen a lot of success, is like being able to say, okay, you did it, now bring someone else along the journey. If I've never been a single mom, it's not that God can't use me to minister to single moms, but I feel like it would be less effective. I have instant credibility. Don't tell me that I don't know what it's like to bust open a piggy bank to put gas in the car. Like, I get it. So that's one thing, is establishing the relationships. And then I think the other thing is it's choice. The women that are successful, and success can be defined a number of ways. There's spiritual, financial, emotional, everything. But the women that are successful made a choice that moved them there. And so I think empowering women that they have a choice, and the choice is, I can lick my wounds for the next. Yeah, it sucked that I was abused for 10 years. Yes, it sucked that I got into a relationship where I was abused for several years after that. It sucked that I had 2 kids and was abandoned. The list is, it's bad. But what am I going to do to move on? I can camp out there, and sadly, too many people do. They become victims that just can't move past it.
Right.
And then, or you make the choice to move on. And so that's probably not going to be the most popular answer.
Yeah.
But if you're a single mom out there that's listening, you stumbled upon this, I just want to say that you do have a choice. You have a choice to get up in the morning, and tomorrow can be the new day. That's the line in the sand. And when you do that, and you make the choice to put one foot in front of the other, you don't have to have the 5-year and 10-year plans mapped out. You don't have to figure out how you're going to get off food stamps and welfare today. You just need to make a choice to do something.
Yeah.
And that's what's transformational. And then the whole Jesus factor is the X factor that will change everything. That's the thing that everybody's looking for, that they don't know that they need. Once you have an encounter with him, not with the church, not with religious people, not with Christianity, but an encounter with Jesus, it will change everything. And you're like motivated to do everything else you wanted to do in life.
So good. Yeah. He's the surgeon. Healthy people don't need a doctor. He really is, because I think about how he got me from where I was to this point. I'm like, no church could have did that. The way he spoke certain things to me to get me to make the decisions and motivated me to get to this point. I'm like, only an all-knowing, being could have done that. So I love that you said that. But I love the quote from the book, Think and Grow Rich. It says, every adversity has a seed of an equal or greater benefit. And your adversity was your teen pregnancies, and you've turned that into your benefit. And I do think that is really what it all boils down to, and that's what's so dangerous about this culture that we're living in now, because everybody wants to blame each other, and it's like this huge victim mentality, and it produces nothing. But even if we give people things like handouts or whatever, and not to say that there shouldn't be certain handouts, but it's the mindset of saying, you owe me. And because I was wrong. No, listen, whatever hand you were dealt, you got to play it. Or you can sit there and, like you said, lick your wounds, and it does nothing.
Right. And it is, I talk a lot about getting to contentment. And contentment is, I find so many people saying, when I get married, or when my kids start driving, or when my kids get out of the house, or like whatever the win is for you, that next season. And they spend so much time looking at the next season that when I lose weight, I'll do this, or whatever it is. I hear it all the time. And it's like, where's the contentment in the current season? Where is the being content with just letting God grow you? It's where we want the miracle. We want this supernatural thing, but we don't want to be in a position for it. And I've just found that the most impactful moments of my life have been the most broken, the moments where I had to just get content with the fact that my kids weren't doing what I thought, or that I was really lonely, or that we had no money, that I had to be content there for a season.
Yeah, absolutely. Last question. I want to talk about your book a little bit. So what motivated you to write it? Not the biography, the other book.
Which is The Church and the Single Mom?
Yes, that one. I know you have, what, 4 books?
Yeah. So The Church and the Single Mom is written to the body of Christ. It's written to not single moms. I think that 2 out of 3 single moms not going to church is not a single mom's problem. That's a body of Christ problem. And so I really just talk a lot about letters that moms had written me through the years, what they say about the church, the wins and the losses. And then what does the Bible say about it? And then how do you get practical? So I talk about my own story and how the church changed my life. I'm not anti-church. I'm like super pro-church, but where were the misses? And it's short. It's like 100 pages or something. It's super quick read, but here's why we have to see these moms. And I get a lot of pushback from pastors who say, don't single moms ministries promote sex outside of marriage, or promote divorce, or do drug addiction ministries promote drug use? No, it's simply saying this is where people are. And we want people to do it God's way. But here's where 15 million mamas are. So do we just ignore them because maybe they didn't do it God's way, or do we meet them where they are? And so I think that's it's been in your face. This is what we're dealing with. And what are you going to do about it?
I love that angle. It would be like the same as saying a food pantry promotes poverty. No, come on. All right. Love it. So tell everybody where they can find you.
thelifeofasinglemom.com. All the media links are there. And so grateful, Rob, for you and what you're doing, and just for an opportunity to be part. I hope it blesses somebody.
Yeah. Well, I think I'll have a lot of single female Christians that follow me, and a lot of them are single moms. So I'm sure there will be someone out there, or many people out there, that this information will benefit. So again, thanks for coming on, Jennifer.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.